Hello. Think we're live. As always, if you can see me, say you can see me. If you can hear me, say you can hear me. Hopefully you can do both. So I'm going to keep my eye on the comments screen so I can see if you can hear me and see me. So it's Friday. It's the last Friday of the month. I think, yes, it is. Therefore, we're having a live video, a very quick one, because as you can probably tell by my face, I am very, very tired and I want an early night. Yay, Megan says. Loud and clear. Brilliant. So it's just a bit of a free-for-all this evening, really. I'm so sorry how rough I look. I know I look like I'm 125 million years old and I need a facelift or something. That's what I would look like with a facelift. So I am very tired, so apologies for how rough I look. And again, if you see me looking down here, as always, I promise I'm not being rude. It's because my laptop is down here and that's where your comments are coming up. So if you've got any questions at all for me this evening, then fire away. Any questions about saddles, saddle fittings, anything like that, me, anything, whatever you want to ask about, then fire away and I will try my best to answer this evening. My number one fan, Maddie Webber, my daughter. We can see and hear you. Don't know what she's got an account on to be able to comment. YouTube, maybe. So this is being streamed on YouTube and both my Facebook page and also Pee Wee Saddlery's Facebook page. So wherever you're watching, hello. I will start. First of all, we've had some like pre question things. So I'll start with them, run through them, answer them. And then in the meantime, if you have any other questions, then please pop them along. I hope you've all had a super duper Friday and you're looking forward to a long bank holiday weekend of no work. Obviously, I'm not, but yes. So I've got some questions coming up on here already. And I promise you, for example, Jenny Ledbetter, I promise you I will get to them. I'm just going to go through the pre-asked questions first. So Lola Bannister, bridging, why does it happen and how to avoid it? So who knows what bridging is? Bridging is basically when your saddle makes a little bridge on your horse's back. So imagine this is your horse's back, this is your saddle, and it sits on and it makes, this is like exaggerated obviously, it makes more contact with the front than it does with the back, and it makes like basically a little bridge across your horse's back. So that's what it is. Why it happens for loads of reasons. So it might happen because your horse's back is this shape and your saddle tree is flat. Therefore, the tree could be the wrong shape for your horse. Obviously, in that case, you need to get a saddle fitter out to come and fit you with a saddle with a different shaped tree. Sometimes your horse's back might be beautifully straight and the saddle might fit beautifully, but then as your horses age, this can happen, or they can lose muscle, or loads of reasons why their backs can drop and it can cause your saddle to bridge. That's bridging. That's why it happens. But there are lots of other reasons. So at this time of year, I see quite a lot of bridging because you see horses that get a little bit fat. And so they can put on like little fat pads. You know, when you see a little fat pony, sometimes they've got a big pad of fat just behind their shoulder, the area where the front of the saddle sits. So even though we sit the tree of the saddle behind that, the actual panel of the saddle can sit on there and it can cause the saddle to sort of, so say your saddle sits really nicely, then your horse suddenly develops this fat pad at the front here. It can cause that to happen. So that can cause a bridge. So little fat pads can cause bridging as well. Putting on weight, getting too wide for the saddle can also, for the same reason, do that and cause it to bridge. So yes, obviously, if you think your saddle is bridging, then get your saddle fitter out. The way to check it is when your saddle is on, where it needs to be in the correct place, if you push, like place your hand on the top of it, so you put a little bit of pressure on it, get your other hand up underneath and run it along underneath the panel, and you'll be able to feel that pressure should be fairly consistent the whole way. You're all going to go and do that tomorrow, and you're going to feel, and some of you are going to feel a bit of a bridge. If there's a bit of a bridge, get your saddle fitter out just in case, but bear in mind that bridging isn't always a problem. Because think about it, some horses, when they stand still, they're like, oh, they let it all hang out, bellies are dropped, back is shaped, saddle sits like this, and then the rider gets on board, wraps their legs around, lifts them up, and sometimes horses, the saddle can bridge, and then when the rider on board, it comes up nicely. So bridging isn't always the end of the world. but it does probably, usually, definitely, always require a saddle fitter. So if you're worried about bridging, again, run your hand along with a bit of pressure on top, make sure it feels even the whole way. And if it doesn't, get your saddle fitter out to check. Equally, something might feel like it doesn't bridge at all. And then when you get on board, your saddle is sitting really nicely like this. And then when you get on board, your horse lifts it back. The opposite of bridging might happen. You might get a little bit of a seesaw happening. And that is why we as saddle fitters exist. That is why we as saddle fitters are trained to watch your horse both statically, standing still, and dynamically moving around with you on board. And that's also why we have to see you ride on your saddle, because sometimes things really do change when you're on board. Does that make sense? How to avoid it? Can't really avoid it. You have to kind of just have your saddle fitted. Does that make sense? Next question. Gail Radcliffe. Talk about the importance of the right fitting girth. We are yet again having to buy another as ours gets fitter. It's really important to have the correctly fitting girth. I could go on forever about the shaped girths. You have to have the correct shape girth for your horse. But in terms of correctly fitting lengthwise, that's also really important. So say you've got a dressage saddle or a monoflap jump saddle or a saddle that requires a short girth. Loads of people have them way too short. They're really short little ones and they have loads of strap and then the saddle. If you've got a short girth, you want that girth to cover as much area as it can without pinching between the saddle flap or the saddle cloth and the girth. You want it to cover as much area as you can, because that's why we make those girths so lovely and padded and soft and squishy, because we want them to cover the area and distribute the pressure. And then long girths, really, you don't want your long girths to only just get up onto the first hole, because if you do that, it means that when you girth your horse up, you're having to straight away girth it up really, really tightly. And they tend to be the horses that when you come along and put your saddle on, they look at you like, I don't think so. And they put their ears back and show you their teeth, because it's not comfortable for them to have that girth done so tight so quickly. Equally, if your girth is too long and it goes right up to the top, then the rider is going to feel it under their legs, which is not comfortable. But also, if you're using like any kind of specialist girthing, so if you're using your point strap or your balance strap or both, and you think the strap's coming like this from the panel, from the tree, they're coming like this from the tree. If you're then putting a girth on that's way too long, you're making that V move all the way up, and then the top of your girth is having to really split, and it doesn't work correctly. So these girths and those straps are designed for your girth to sit about halfway up. Your girth buckle should sit about halfway up the strap. So normally about hole 3 or 4 when you're tightened up and you're tightened up and you're ready to go. So if you're on about hole 3 or 4, it means that number 1, when you first put your saddle on, you can put it on hole 1 and your horse is nice and comfortable, and you can do it up gradually, but you don't get up to the highest point, so your girth still works correctly and the rider can't feel the buckle under their leg. Just going to check the comments. Excellent. Right, I've got loads more questions, but I'll just run through these ones really quick that we've had in advance. Deb, any advice on saddles for horses with short backs? Yes, you can get loads of saddles for horses with short backs. Number 1, a short back matters not a slightest bit if your rider is really small. But if you've got, for example, a long legged rider and a horse with a short back, and then the rider needs a saddle that's longer than the horse's back can take, because remember, we can't really go back past that last rib officially, then in some cases, some saddles have what's called like a short panel, and you look at them side on and they've got their seat is longer than their panel. Their panel is quite short and that panel is that little squishy bit. Some of them have something called an upswept panel, which is where the panel doesn't come out and sit on the horses that way. It sort of sweeps upwards and doesn't make so much contact with the back of the horse. There's loads of things. And remember, like I hear lots of people say, oh, my horse can only take a 17-inch saddle. It's got a short back, it can only take a 16.5-inch, or it can only take a 17-inch saddle. My saddle fitter told me. But remember that different brands of saddle and different makes and different styles within the same brand all measure up differently. So you're not always stuck with a 16.5 or a 17 or whatever inch saddle, because some of them have short panels, some of them have quite generous seats, some of them are more forward in the leg. If you've got like a really long leg but small bum teenage rider and you struggle to get their leg in the saddle rather than their bum in the saddle, then sometimes the answer is to bring the saddle forward at the front. So give them slightly more forward cut at the front, e.g. like a jump saddle or something. So that's an answer for short backs. Kelly, tell us your story. How did you get into saddle fitting? I'll come back to that one because it's a long one. How to properly fit a VIP pad. I have the fear of not having the saddle in the correct place, and with the grip of a VIP, I can't put a saddle on my normal way. Well, first of all, the grip of a VIP, in my opinion, I know they say that they can be used on the skin, but I think that all gel pads should be used between the saddle cloth and the saddle. So once you've got your VIP saddle pad thing on top of your normal saddle cloth, hoik it up into the saddle, so shugle it up so you've got the saddle cloth up into the gullet of the saddle, and then do your number up and everything and leave it on there. So then when you're putting it on with the numno or the saddle cloth on your horse's back, so then you can then just slide it back into the correct place. Because I think having the grip of the gel on your horse's back, a lot of people use gel and a lot of people use grip to try and grip the saddles to the horse's back. But I think in the majority of cases, obviously under the guidance of your saddle fitter, in some cases it's okay, but in the majority of cases, we shouldn't be sticking saddles to horses' backs, because horses' backs are dynamic. They move, they swing, they move, and a saddle is quite stationary. So you don't want to be sticking something that's stationary to something that's dynamic. Does that make sense? So yeah, in case of a VIP or indeed any gel pad, pop it between the saddle cloth and the saddle. I wondered if you have a good way to clean and dehair a very dense fleece real sheepskin half pad. I noticed mine has gone lumpy in places where hair and grease accumulate. I hear you, sister. Yes, we have this happen here. Sometimes you put them on and you realise the horses are molting. You get like actual clumps of hair. The best thing for real sheepskin is either Lemure do a wool wash, which you can get from Horse Health, or human hair conditioner. So like brush off as much as you can with a brush, like a dandy brush even. Brush off as much of the hair as you can, and then get a human hair conditioner and literally like massage it in, and then pop it in the wash on a wool wash. Dry it naturally, don't put it on a radiator. If they're really ground in, it might take a couple of washes. There we go. That's all the pre-asked questions. So I'll go on to the normal questions. What half pad would you recommend? I don't recommend any in particular, because it depends really on why you're using a half pad. I will say any half pad you use, you need to make sure it's got a clear gullet. So the whole way down the length of the spine has to be clear. So no fluff on that bit there, or no padding. So some of them don't have fluff. Some of them just have like little pockets, or the foam has to be clear down the gullet, the whole length of it. And that's because you really want it to sit up into your saddle and not press down on the horse's spine. So along that kind of vein as well, you want it to be shaped. So when you look at it side on, you want it to be shaped as if it's got a wither. So you want your half pad side on to look like it has its own wither. And that again is to sit it up within the saddle and stop it pushing down on the horse's wither. There are gel ones, there are lambskin ones, there are foam ones. All of them have shown in testing to act as quite good shock absorbers. Some horses quite like them, some horses hate them. Sometimes you need them, sometimes you don't. I wouldn't, for example, put a very thick half pad onto a saddle on a horse that's got a lot of its own padding, like a big fat barrel-like type, cob type. You wouldn't necessarily want to add any extra bulk in there. You want to try and make the saddle sit into them as much as you can. However, if you've got like a thoroughbred or a sports horse that's got that like muscle wastage like alongside its spine or behind its withers, then sometimes half pads can be really good in that sense, because they can just help fill in that little gap and act a bit of a shock absorber between the saddle and the top of the ribs, called the rib shelf. Hi, this is cool. Thanks. Knee and thigh blocks, are they a good thing? Hell yes. Is there such a thing as too big? I don't think there's anything as such as too big personally for myself, but from seeing other people ride, yes, there's definitely such a thing as being too big. But actually, it's not just the size, it's the positioning. They have to sit in the right place for your leg. So like a big knee block that suits one person won't suit another person. So someone with long, thin thighs might sit behind a knee block differently than someone with short, fatter thighs, for example. I personally think that a lot of knee blocks sit in front of the knee when actually you want it to sit. So imagine this is your leg in the saddle. So a lot of knee blocks sit here and don't really do much other than push the like the rider's leg outwards, whereas I like the ones that sit here, that sit above your thigh. I personally find them more stabilizing and stop you from falling out of the saddle quite so much. Thigh blocks, so sometimes people call the knee blocks that sit above their thigh blocks, but to me a thigh block is the block at the back of the saddle, and they're good for if you've got, like me, like lower legs that when you're jumping like to try and clap behind the saddle. They're good for that. They stop your legs from swinging back quite so much. But knee blocks are very popular. Certainly now on the dressage saddles we get a lot of like the external blocks, and they really, really, really lock your leg in. I've seen your YouTube videos on half pads, but which would you recommend purely for comfort, not to affect fit? I think it depends on what kind of comfort you need. Is it just, if it's just for like shock absorption, then the wool ones did come up best in the like the pressure testing. So Centaur Biomechanics did loads of pressure testing with half pads, and the wool ones did come up best. So if it's for shock absorption, a wool one, again, has to be real wool, none of this fake stuff, has to be shaped, look like it's got its own wither, and has to have a clear spine the whole way down. And not too thick. You don't need too thick, and keep it clean and put it between the saddle cloth and the saddle always. Oh, this is a good question. Could a poorly fitting, this is from Amber, could a poorly fitting saddle cause stumbling in the front legs? Yes, 100%. So on the back of the horse's shoulder blade are muscles that kind of sit, and so imagine this is a shoulder blade here, and their shoulder blade is attached to their front leg, and as their front leg moves, their shoulder blade does this, and it's moved with these little muscles amongst others, but to simplify it, little like shape of muscles here, and as they contract, it moves the shoulder blade, which moves the front leg. Now the saddle sits here on these muscles here, so there's a variety of muscles in there, but the main ones that we think of, like the trapezius muscles, and those muscles there, we have them here on us, these little triangle of muscles here, but on the horses it's what moves their front legs. So if we have a saddle that pinches there and like hinders those muscles through there, it means that they're not getting this swing so much through their scapula, or their scapula is being restricted, and if their scapula is restricted, their front legs don't lift up as much, and therefore they can trip and stumble much more easily. So one of the things that we look for in saddle fitting actually is stumbling and tripping in the front. It can obviously be a sign of a bazillion other things, but saddle fit is one of them. So yes, it's definitely, if you've got a horse that's stumbling and you feel your saddle's tight at the front, then they can definitely be connected. Get yourself a saddle fitter. Hey, you look fab. Stop it. I really don't. Not today. I look rough. Can anything be done about my stirrup bars being too far forward? Can they be lengthened backwards? They can in theory, but it's a really massive job. Not worth doing, I wouldn't think. Some saddles you can get have adjustable stirrup bars now, like the Bates new ones. I think even some of the Wintec ones have got them on. So they've got stirrup bars that you can literally move forward and backwards. So that's maybe something that's worth thinking about. If they are in the wrong position for you, maybe have a look at getting a different saddle and try some with some adjustable stirrup bars, because that's quite a good idea. Hi, Poppy. Ooh, this is a tricky one. My physio has said I should ride my mare either bareback or with a bareback pad. Any ideas? Ideally something with stirrups. As a saddle fitter, we would say, and a physio would usually say, that something with stirrups and no tree is not a good idea, because you will have a pressure point where the stirrups attach. So it depends on why your physio has said to ride bareback. Personally, if I was going to ride bareback or recommend anyone to ride bareback, I would be saying to do it without stirrups, because one of the main pressure points you get with a bareback pad is on the stirrup bar area. So if you're going to ride bareback, I think you need to do it without stirrups, and have a chat with your physio and see why they've said to ride bareback, and then maybe have a chat with your saddle fitter and see what they suggest as well. Oh, this is Amber again, who has said about stumbling in the front legs. I should say the horse's neck has been scanned and he needed steroid injections in C6, C7. That's kind of like base, like right base of the neck. But he's still tripping and girthy, so I wonder if it's a saddle issue. Oh, I've frozen. Oh, fuck. Oops, I just swore and you can still hear me. This is awkward. My camera's frozen, but I'm going to keep talking. Yes, the horse's neck has been scanned. He needed steroid injections in C6, C7, but he's still tripping and girth. So I wonder if it's a saddle issue. So yes, it can be a saddle issue, but equally the C6, C7 area is really, really connected with the front leg movements. So I think have a chat with your vet and see what they say, because and definitely get your saddle checked, because if they've had steroid injections in their neck, they're going to be moving differently anyway, and therefore the saddle is going to fit differently. My camera is driving me completely nuts. Last week it overheated. This week it's run out of batteries despite having a full battery. So I'm going to go now, stamp on my camera, apologies for the swear word, and I'm going to redo this tomorrow with my camera plugged in. So I will keep track of all of your questions and we're going to redo this tomorrow, and I will see you all then.